So on to the last session, which is capital markets dynamics that unfolds post-union budget. We have on panel Dr. Satyendra Nayak and Mr. Manoj Swain. About Dr. Satyendra Nayak, I would like to give a brief introduction. He has 35 years of exposure and contribution in economic policy, banking, mutual funds, and finance with public sector, with Bank of Baroda in '78 as manager, planning, and now he used to hold position as chief economist with investment advisory firm in Boston. Dr. Nayak has vast exposure in capital market instruments, portfolio management, flotation of mutual funds, including offshore country funds, and he used to be with international division as CEO of UTI Investment Advisory Co. And during his tenure as Secretary and Treasurer of India Growth Fund, he was ranked as the best performing fund among all offshore India funds listed in New York Stock Exchange. And this session is likely to be over in 40 minutes. I would request our speaker on panel to give presentation of about 20 minutes each. And then if Dr. Paritosh Basu has some question, he can pose some. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. I would request Dr. Nayak if you can please.
Sanskriti has given me ultimatum. Not more than I'll be very brief. Plus, this is usually post-lunch session is called as graveyard shift. Most of the blood goes to the stomach and not to the brain. So people, the audience is less attentive than usually. So I'm covering capital market, which over the last few years, we have seen that capital market has been a center of global attention, as well as in India. Whenever the crisis comes, it goes down, and whenever there is a recovery, there is a boom in the market. That we have seen recently in our Indian stock market. Now, today we are all so much interconnected globally, not only physically in terms of transportation, but at a speed of light in terms of transactions, that what they used to say, if the Federal Reserve sneezes, emerging markets will catch cold, is virtually existing now, is happening now. And we can no longer remain insulated from the outside world. We have to be very careful as to what is happening in the rest of the world. That's why I started with global context, because India itself is globally, I would say many economists or global observers place India as 10th, 11th or 15th in the global context. But actually, not in terms of per capita, but also in terms of not the GDP in dollar terms, because the GDP in dollar terms is about $2 trillion vis-a-vis $18 trillion of US, which comes very low. But you know, this is divided by 62 rupees per dollar, and we know that is the exchange rate which is existing in the balance of payments for the exports, imports, inward flow, outward flow. That is not captured the real purchasing power of the, so real purchasing power parity of GDP of India is somewhere around $6 trillion, which places India as the third largest economy in the world. I need not tell you why third largest, because country's wealth is in its resources. And if you see resources of India, we are almost second and third largest in almost all respects. If you take population, democracy, that's the two factors. in arable land, I will be surprised that we are second largest, but we have not made use of that for agricultural growth. We are second largest in rice, wheat, sugarcane. We are second largest in coal reserves and several iron ore and several technical manpower and several other forms. Fourth largest in railway network. So I need not go on to that. But when it comes to capital market, we are nearly 9th biggest in the world. At the current exchange rate, nearly $1.6 trillion, and it accounts to nearly 70% of our GDP, which is quite large. And globally, it is very influential. But if you see, the New York Stock Exchange is about $18 trillion, NASDAQ is about $6 trillion, China is about $5.4 trillion. China has always been 3 times India, in whichever measure you take, except population, which is only 200 million now, almost we are closing to China. But in terms of number of listed companies, which is very important, is that we have 5,000 listed companies, which is close to US, which is in the New York Stock Exchange. So this is very important, that we are a country which is demographically very intensive country, and we cannot follow the Western model. Our companies, our entrepreneurship is always likely to be higher than any other country. The only competitor to India is China, and China has a tradition of being communist country for so long. But in spite of that U-turn which they took from communism to capitalism in whatever form, they have progressed and got the market capitalization of that is really remarkable for a country like. Well, that is also because of the help which has taken in terms of technology and capital transfers from US and other developed nations like Japan. So that is the context in which we are today, and we are in a very positive context in the world. As they call India emerging market, we are almost, China and India as almost emerged countries now. They can no longer be termed as emerging market economies. If you take the population of emerging market, it's nearly 85% of population, global population, but we have only 13% of global market capitalization. So that shows the tremendous potential for capital market growth in India and other emerging markets. Now India is the second largest emerging market after China. But if you take the number of companies, it is the second, it is the next, it is the first. Because the number of companies which are in India are more than the number of companies in China is listed. But capital market is not whole economy. I will not discuss this in another session maybe. But capital market is very sensitive aspect which can draw resources for the growth of the economy. I won't say that capital market will immediately boost the growth of the economy. But since capital market boosts investment rate, it is one of the critical elements of the economy. If you consider economy as an engine, then capital market is its heart. It pumps resources into different productive areas, productive capacities, which go and generate income and output, and which again produces consumer demand, and then the growth cycle starts. But what is the crux of capital market? As I said, crux is the sentiment. And what is the sentiment? Sentiment in capital market is risk and return. There is nothing else than that. Every investor in the capital market wants return, and he measures the risk. He measures in terms of his own guesstimate, his own estimate of risk, and he measures return in terms of estimates of his expected return. So as Keynes said in Great Depression, he brought out a book, A General Theory. He said expectations are most important in the growing, in order to overcome depression or stagnation. Expectations are more important, and expectation can change over time. You have seen in India how expectations have changed and brought the index from nearly 20,000 to 30,000, 18,000 to 30,000. Lot of changes have taken place, but mainly the expectations have changed. So the leadership of Prime Minister has changed the entire sentiment. I will skip over the global monetary policy because it was already taken over by several other speakers. But I would like to highlight one particular point, which is the liberal policy of Federal Reserve and several other nations today of zero interest rates. Now, when a central bank pursues a policy, it tries to regulate three prices, because central bank create money and destroy money. Nobody else has the power. It has a monopoly of. Banks are also licensed by the central bank. So entire banking institution is a monopolized institution which is catering to the economy and which is giving us growth, because without finance you cannot have growth. So what are the three prices which central bank controls or regulates? The first price is the rate of interest. Rate of interest is the price of money. If you hold in cash, you will not earn, and the rate of interest is related to time. That if you hold money, you will earn 8% per year. Second price which the central bank controls is the consumer price inflation. Is there again related to time? Consumer price inflation is 10% per annum over a period of 1 year. So if you are holding money in cash, your purchasing power is getting reduced, eroded every day by 10% annual rate. That is how it is. So if you hold in any other financial assets, you earn, but if you hold in cash. So that is the second measure, which second price. It's a price. It's a price of money. If you don't hold it in money terms, in cash terms, then you don't face that inflation, because you will face a different kind of inflation. And the third price is the exchange rate. The rate at which you exchange your currency for a foreign currency. Now, there is no time element in that, but every country has to manage its exchange rate because you are dealing with the rest of the world, and you have to decide at what price you will deal with that rest of the world in terms of several transactions, trade transactions, remittances, capital inflows, capital outflows. All that comes in balance of payments accounts, and all that is come into foreign exchange market by demand and supply, which the Reserve Bank of India controls. So that is the third price which Reserve Bank or central bank controls. Now again, that particular exchange rate is not the rate at which, that is the rate at which it balances the balance of payments. That's not the rate which equalizes the economy as such. So many times we see it is either overvalued or undervalued. So what has happened is these three prices, out of these three prices, the most important price is the rate of interest. From before the crisis, before the international crisis in 2000, rates of interest in developed countries, like even the US, was about 4 to 5%. This rate was reduced to nearly 0%, 0.25%, so almost virtually no cost for money at all. Not only that, but there is a quantitative easing, which means that the central bank went on purchasing the securities of. So far, this is an unusual measure globally, not undertaken by any central bank. Now, India has not gone in quantitative easing. They are not buying purchases, buying securities. But all the nations, ECB, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and Federal Reserve, have bought trillions of dollars of securities, not only government securities, but also mortgage debt securities into their balance sheet, because of which the liquidity in the global economy has gone up by how much? Statistics says that balance sheet of Federal Reserve was $1 trillion. It has gone to $4.5 trillion now, 4.5 times over the last 6 years. Same thing with Bank of England, same thing with European Central Bank, same thing with Bank of Japan. The total balance sheet of these central banks has gone up from $8 trillion to $22 trillion last year. So that's about a lot of money in the global economy. Now, why do you think now, if there's so much of liquidity in the economy, then why are the prices not going up? The prices are not going up because in the developed economy, they are not facing inflation. They are facing the problem of deflation. In Germany, in Europe, the prices were going down, they're concerned. In Japan, prices are going down. There isn't, because after the crisis, when the demand suddenly went down, we slumped into a surplus economy. And as is indicated by our economist here, that excess capacity in India itself, excess capacity means unused utilized capacity, itself is about 50% now. Most of the manufacturing is surplus capacity now. In the Western world, it is much more because the demand is saturated and excess capacity is too much. So there is no consumer price inflation there. Commodity prices are going down. So where is the money going? The money is going in real assets. The money is going not in some of the financial assets like securities also, equities, and real estate. These have shown tremendous growth in the last few years. So if you have seen that there has been tremendous asset price inflation. In the US itself, the Dow Jones and S&P has increased, and the rate of return on equity assets have been nearly 18 to 20%. But what about productive investment? There is no productive investment. Companies are flush with money and they are carrying on their cash. There is no investment because there is surplus capacity, and Keynes said expectations are there that the earnings will not grow. So which are the economies which are best? You see here the interest rates in most of the developed world is not